How many times this past week, month, have you had to call something or someone out for being unfair? You know, maybe it was the ref at the game the other night, your sibling maybe getting special treatment, or your friend cheating in a game. I mean, the list could go on and on. And when we see unfair things happen, it can bring up a bunch of different feelings for different people. So think for a minute, really quick, reflect. What are the top 2 feelings that you experience when something unfair happens? Maybe it's sadness, disappointment, anger, insecurity, frustration. Growing up, my family and I would take trips up to a place called Duluth in Minnesota. And in Duluth, there's a children's museum that we would go that was always super fun. There was like this farming section where my brother pretended to farm carrots. For some reason, I always imagined like a bunny version of Micah doing that. And then there was a castle with knight's armor, and if you flipped a switch, like this dragon would inflate, and you could pretend that you were fighting the dragon named Sparky. I mean, it was awesome. But there was this one part where you could build a wall out of some foam bricks, and my siblings and I wanted to build a wall and then get a picture of us bursting through it. So we started building the wall, laying down the bricks brick by brick, and then on the count of 3 we were all going to run and dive through the wall. Okay, so the wall has been built. My dad's standing there with his camera, and my dad starts counting. 1, 2, 3, and then I went. But here's the thing, only I went. I guess my siblings either thought we were gonna go on 1, 2, 3, go, or they didn't hear my dad's voice or something. I mean, they're all adamant. My dad didn't even count. But long story short, I was the only one who ended up bursting through the wall. And the solution that my parents decided to come up with was rebuild the wall and then have Micah and Laura get their picture taken bursting through the wall, since I already had one. And this sounds fair, but I thought it was completely unfair. I mean, I wanted to be in the picture with my siblings, but instead this is how the picture turned out. I mean, if you look really closely at this picture, you'll notice that I might look a little bit upset. Really quickly, side tangent, it's not important to the story in any way, shape, or form, but I would like to point out my sister's face as well. I just think it's funny. There's no meaning to it, but it's funny. So if you think what happened is fair, I didn't get my picture taken with it, then you're wrong. And as punishment, I think you need to like and subscribe. And if you think it was unfair, if you're on my side, then you're pog. You are smart, but you should also like and subscribe because you're pog and not wrong. Unfortunately, we know that life doesn't always end up in the way that we think it's supposed to be. We see unfair things happen all the time. We see the one kid finally stand up to the bully in class, only to get in trouble for being disruptive. All the while, everybody knows that it's the bully who instigated things. You know, we see the student who sleeps through class and still gets an A, while the person who studies for hours and hours gets a C. You know, we see, read, or hear about unfair things happening to people around the world every single day. And when something feels unfair, it can bring up a lot of emotions in a person, which is totally understandable. I mean, we want things to be made right. Where is the justice in all of this? We're actually going to talk about something that Peter, one of Jesus's disciples, did to Jesus before the crucifixion. Before we get to that, if this video is helpful to you in any way, you should check out some of the other videos on this page linked right here. Our goal is to equip you with tools to help you navigate life and your relationship with God. So I'd love it if you checked some of those other ones out after you spend some time on this one. Anyways, back to the swing of things. So Jesus had different types of friendships with all of his disciples. And I mean, this makes sense. We do the exact same thing in our own lives. I mean, we have those friends we sit at lunch with and do schoolwork with, maybe do a study group with. We have friends that we go to the party with on the weekend. Some of them we hang out with at their house because their family's awesome. Their pantry is stacked with the best snacks. And then there are some that we don't hang out at their house because it's not as fun. But one one of Jesus' friends, his name was Peter, was the friend that you don't take to the party because he may say something offensive to somebody, and before you know it, you're in a fight. Shout out to my friend Calvin, I love you, but you're also that friend. That was Peter. He was the type of friend who always seemed to say or do something without fully thinking it through. Some of you may have a friend like that. Like I said, Calvin, I love you. You're that friend. Some of you might be that friend. But Peter was the kind of follower, I think, of Jesus that most of us can relate to. And in this particular situation, Jesus was finishing up dinner with his disciples after sharing some difficult news with them. He had just shared that one of the disciples around the dinner table was going to betray him. And now we all know that the betrayal of one person, Judas, would lead to Jesus' death. And I mean, even today, like thousands of years later, the name Judas is still connected to the idea of betrayal. But Jesus knew that technically all of his friends would abandon him, and he told them that. And of course, Peter is the one who responds and speaks up without thinking it through. Check it out. It says, Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." And Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." Matthew 26, 33 through 35a. Now, at this point in their lives, the disciples had been learning from Jesus' teachings for years, and everything Jesus ever said would happen, happened. But our friend Peter was convinced that he would never deny Jesus. There's no way he would betray his teachers. But then, a few hours later, while Jesus was going through a frightening trial that would lead to his death, Peter was approached by some townspeople who asked if he was one of Jesus' disciples. And 3 times, one right after the other, Peter denied that he even knew Jesus, his teacher and friend. What would you do if your best friend acted like they didn't even know you on the most difficult night of your life? Would you want to get back at them for what they did? Would you want to drop them as your friend forever? Maybe betray them in return? I mean, after all, that would be the fair thing to do. Well, here's what Jesus did. After being resurrected, Jesus decided to surprise his disciples with a beachside breakfast, and here is what happened. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know that I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus told him. Jesus then repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," Peter said. "You know that I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. And then a 3rd time, he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And at this point, Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a 3rd time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And then Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." John 21, 15 through 17. Jesus was showing Peter that their relationship could be restored. Plus, he was encouraging Peter to lead and care for the people who would follow him in the days ahead. Jesus made sure to restore the friendship back to the same solid place it was before the denial happened. It would have been totally fair for Jesus to respond to Peter by not even acknowledging his presence, or by losing his temper with Peter, or by lecturing him. I mean, after all, Peter totally betrayed him. But instead, Jesus confirmed that Peter still loved him and then reestablished their friendship. Just like that. How totally, absolutely, and completely unfair. Jesus' response was 100% unfair in the best way possible. Technically, what Jesus did by befriending Peter again wasn't fair, but the word unfair has picked up a very negative meaning in today's society. So another word to describe the way that Jesus treated Peter is grace. Grace is being unfairly good to someone who doesn't deserve it even a little bit. I mean, that was the situation that was happening between Jesus and Peter. Jesus was unfairly good to Peter on the beach after the resurrection. And it's an example of how God treats us as well. I mean, God's grace is unfairly good. Even though we're not perfect and we mess up every single day, God is always willing to extend grace for the sake of the relationship that we have with God. Now, I mentioned this earlier about how unfair situations can bring up many different feelings and emotions inside a person. When a person is treated unfairly in a negative way, it can create feelings of anger and frustration, hopelessness, fear, and even low self-esteem. But grace can also stir up different feelings as well. The difficult thing about grace is how easy it is. It's a gift that is given when you don't deserve it. I mean, let's think about it this way for a second. Imagine I were to Venmo you $10 right now. To some of you, this may not be much, but I'm a resident, okay? That's a lot of money. I'm poor, okay? If you like nacho cheese, Doritos, tacos, or whatever, like food, that's $10. And so imagine, right, okay, imagine a friend sent you $10 for no reason at all one day at school. I mean that'd be surprising and great, right? I mean oh shoot, $10? But okay, now picture this, right? This friend that has Venmo'd you $10, imagine it was a friend whose feelings you had hurt literally the day before. You were a jerk, you knew it, you were mad about something else, and they just happened to talk to you next, then you took out your feelings on them, and they had no clue that you were upset and that you were doing that, but you did anyways. You were wrong. And you feel bad. You feel bad about it. And so at home you're all right, man, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna apologize to them the next day. And as you're walking up to apologize, they say, hey, I know this is random. Let's grab lunch today. I Venmo'd you $10. Want to get something and talk. I know that this is kind of a cheesy example, but there's probably still something in your heart that kind of feels it. I mean, you see the power of grace. It actually means something. And it's difficult to know how to respond to it. I mean, it's difficult to take a gift like that because you feel like you didn't deserve it. I mean, if anything, you deserved the opposite. And so you feel kind of ashamed. You feel embarrassed. You'd rather them be mad and yell at you and tell you what you did wrong than give you $10. But why would we rather that? Because it doesn't seem fair, and therefore it's really hard for us to receive it. God is ready and willing to treat us just like Jesus treated Peter. When you mess up, when I mess up, God is always willing to forgive us and to show us grace. That's just who God is. And so the question that we all have to ask ourselves is am I ready to receive it? Are you ready to receive it? I mean, in fact, that's the first thing I want you to do in response to God's grace, is accept it. Grace is a gift that we don't deserve. It's an unfairly good gift. There's nothing we could ever do to earn it, nothing we could ever do to deserve it. We just get it. So don't reject the gift out of pride or as a way to punish yourself. Accept the opportunity to have a good relationship with God. For some of you, it might feel difficult to accept, but I promise it's actually kind of easy. You just got to accept God's grace and forgiveness. And for some of you, you might feel it's a really big relief. And that's totally normal feeling too. So accept God's grace and forgiveness. I mean, it's literally meant for you. That's the whole reason it exists. And when it comes to grace, being unfair is okay because God's grace is unfairly good. And so here's the next thing. After you've accepted all of it, you got to share it, right? 3 times Jesus asked Peter if he loved him. And by the 3rd time, Peter was hurt. Jesus said, feed my sheep. This wasn't literal. This was Jesus giving Peter an assignment to take care of all of the people that Jesus loves and cares for. It's the kind of assignment that Jesus gives to everyone who has a relationship with him and chooses to follow him, to feed his sheep. God gives us the same grace Peter was given, which means our job is to now go and do the same. Even when people don't deserve it, show them the grace that you were given. It's a gift, and it's a gift that's meant to be shared. When someone at school yells at you for something that you did accidentally, show them grace, even if they don't deserve it. When a friend makes a mistake that upsets you, show them grace, even when they don't deserve it. When you tell your sibling a secret and then they share it with someone else, show them grace, even if they don't deserve it. And when your friend flakes on your party, show them grace, even when they don't deserve it. I mean, imagine what would change in the way you think of and see God based on God's unfairly good grace. And now imagine how different your life would look and our world would look if we were more intentional about receiving and giving grace. So when you head out for the rest of your week, when you click off of this video and go about the rest of your life, think about what a fair response would be if you've disappointed someone, abandoned them, or let them down. And then imagine what God's unfairly good response to you would be. The best part is you can be confident that God's grace is unfairly good.